you go in any high school, and every time I go to a high school, I say, what are your number 1, 2, and 3 biggest problems here? Number 1, there I say kids struggle with anxiety, depression, and suicidal thoughts. And then after that, it's usually like drugs or booze, right? It's always anxiety, depression. It's always mental health.
Yep.
So why are we not addressing this more as the biggest problem that's killing kids? The phone, like, I'm so glad you said just like that. The phone, this is the biggest threat to the kids' safety, to their mental health, to their life.
This episode is brought to you in part by Thin Line Anthem. Thin Line Anthem is a vitamin and supplement company started by first responders with first responders in mind. Thin Line Anthem has great supplements. Right now, I am using their protein and advanced performance vitamin pack as part of my daily regimen. For 20% off, use promo code ITSNEEDED. That's all caps with one word at checkout. Again, that's ITSNEEDED, all caps with one word for 20% off at checkout. Thanks again and enjoy the episode. Hey, what's going on? Welcome to another episode of the It's Needed podcast, where we discuss real issues involving law enforcement in the community. It's your boy Ryan Tillman, founder of Breaking Barriers United, and I'm joined today by the light-skinned wonder, Mr. Oh No, it's the Popo. What's going on, AJ?
We having a little technical difficulties today, but we're going to edit all this out. Billy's freaking out about a spider. We don't know what's going on with Ryan. He can't talk straight, so show us a little grace today.
I missed AJ's birthday. I mean, fair.
We're going to talk about that later.
Oh, man. Thanks for coming, AJ. We got the savage himself, Mr. Billy. What's going on, Billy?
Hey, it wasn't a normal spider. This thing was a tarantula, and it was in here in the room. So.
Bro, do you guys want me to be real, or do you guys want me to make a lie right now?
Put it out there.
Bro, that spider was about this big, bro. That spider was so small.
And Billy hit that Mariah Carey note.
He was quick. Small but quick.
Bro, you should see how Billy's sitting on the stool right now, bro. He has like his feet in the air.
He got both feet up. His feet don't touch no way.
Oh, man. And we are joined by a very, very special guest today. My friend Collin, man. Collin, how are you doing today?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me. Sorry, I'm really worried about that spider, man. I don't know. You guys have any bug killer?
I appreciate that. Thank you,
bro. I've never seen Billy freak out about anything now, but now I know.
Who would have thought, dude? A 1/4 centimeter spider, man.
Oh man. Thanks for joining us, Collin, man. Where are you located, if you don't mind me asking?
So I'm just south of Salt Lake City, Utah, in a little city called Provo.
Nice. I know exactly where Provo's at. I played college football, and so we would travel to Utah or travel to BYU to play.
Yeah, right. Dude, I can see BYU out my window, dude, right there.
Yeah, I know exactly where that's at. And then we actually, I'm actually going to be going to Utah at the end of the month for a little family road trip.
Oh, fun, man.
Yeah,
it's nice right now. It's hot, dude. So if you're going southern, dude,
I think that's exactly where we're going in southern Utah. So it's only like from where I'm located, it's about 4 hours and 45 minutes. So.
Awesome.
So what's funny is I was trying to figure out where Utah was on the map.
It's in the Midwest. Yeah, that's what people think.
AJ's like, what? Where's the city of Utah located at?
Hey, so if I took a blank like diagram of the United States and said pick out every state, would you be able to do it?
No.
Like draw in the name of the state?
No, they're like cut out, but there's no names written in. So you got to say, okay, this
I think
is
I would be able to do a lot of them.
Bruh, me and the wife did it. We got like 50%. We're like, when you got to the middle, we were like, I don't know what's here. Like,
I know Iowa, dude.
Yeah, Iowa.
Oh man. Speaking of geography, I traveled to Minnesota last week in Minneapolis, and I think it's not Minneapolis. It's How do you pronounce it?
Minneapolis.
Because they will be quick to correct you because they hate when people say like mini.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, so I traveled there, and man, let me just tell you, that was a very, very unique / somber experience. I've told many people before, I've gone to many of law enforcement memorials when officers are killed in the line of duty. I went to Baton Rouge when officers were ambushed a few years ago. I've gone to some here in California, and I do it because I want to pay my respects, obviously, to the family and to the servanthood of that officer that was killed. But I also want to go because it's a good reminder of the dangers of our job. So, as I was in Minnesota last week, I was like, you know what? I have to go down to where George Floyd was killed, because if I'm truly about bridging that gap between law enforcement and the community, if I'm truly about seeing both sides of the equation, then I have to be able to go and see where we've done wrong by somebody and, pay my respects, in order to bridge that gap as well. So I went down to where George Floyd was killed and stood right where he was killed, right in front of the store. And let me just tell you, man, it was very somber in many ways. I've never experienced nothing like that before. And then even in the city, they have signs that say no police beyond this point. I got to talk to many different people. Wow. Yeah, got to talk to many different people that have been impacted directly by those events. And, I guess they said violence has rapidly increased since the killing of George Floyd. There are citizens on patrol in the street. It's just wild. And then the other part of that is, the media coverage that they get and the media coverage that they don't get. What I mean is obviously we all know that, that's a terrible situation, but, without getting political and all the other stuff. But when we were talking about BLM, they were like, man, what's sad is, and I'm talking to some black pastors out there, and they're like, man, we've been feeding people every single day, like lines of people feeding people, because we just, not only was it, did all the stores get looted, but you have COVID-19, it was just a perfect storm. So there's people that are hungry and everything like that. So he's like, we're feeding all these people. And he was like, and Black Lives Matter in the state of Minnesota to this day has made about $35 million. He was like, do you know how much money we got from that? Zero. He was like, they actually almost had it out with one another because of this whole situation. So my thing was like, again, without getting all in debt about into deep about it, it was what I've realized is that when Black Lives Matter first started years and years and years ago, the slogan I understood. I always understood the slogan, but what it's turned out to be and what the agenda behind it, I feel that it's being used to push a political. They're using the death of one man to push a political agenda, which is sad. And so, but it was just crazy, man. I got to talk to a lot of, gang members and past gang members. I met this lady named Alice Johnson, who was granted clemency by Donald Trump, which was crazy. She received a life sentence for drug trafficking. She was the messenger. So she's actually going to be on the podcast as well. Kim Kardashian and Kanye West actually helped her get out, and she got to meet the president and everything like that. And so she was even saying like, and this is a black lady, and she was like, it's just crazy. Like, none of that got coverage. None of that got coverage as much as it should have when I went there. And it was a few of us others. She was like, I definitely was wrong for doing what I did, but I didn't deserve to get a life sentence. And so the mere fact that somebody can pardon me to get out was beyond a blessing. And so she's just a phenomenal lady. So I'm get off of my soapbox right now, because this episode is more so about Collin and the work that he's doing. But in light of current events, man, I just thought it was a cool trip to take, and to get out of your comfort zone. I think a lot of times where we live, it's very easy to become comfortable and become naive to the issues of the world or the issues of the nation that are going on. And that's kind of a good lead into my man Collin, and the work that you're doing, man. On the way to the studio this morning, I was listening to your TEDx talk about, social media and phones. And let me tell you, you have me convicted, my brother. You have me for rightful reasons, man. I almost, it's so funny because after I listened to that, I didn't even want to look at my phone. Like, my phone was vibrating. I didn't even want to look at it. I was like, I feel guilty if I look at my phone right now. So yeah, man. So that being said, man, tell us about yourself, Collin.
So I'm a dad. I got 4 kids. I got 9th grade down to 1st grade 2.5 years ago. I had a little small Instagram following from using it kind of as a funny platform to like make fun of social media. I had this like kind of sketch character, like this, it was like an SNL character I created where I was kind of poking fun of like influencers by becoming one of them, but just being like really flamboyant and over the top, like kind of just making fun of how like toxic, especially Instagram would become. Especially like where I live in Utah, like it's like Truman Show out here. A lot of communities where everyone's like, everything's perfect, families are perfect, wives are perfect, everyone's like, it's all this rat race. And so I was using this account as like humor to show how dumb everything's turned into, and it was waking a lot of people up. A lot of lot of moms, a lot of women following me, and they're like, dude, you're like saving my mental health. Like, I didn't even realize how bad social media has affected me as a mom and as a woman, especially. Like, it's just, I go on these accounts, I follow these mommy bloggers and these influencers. I'm like, I just feel fat and ugly and gross like all the time. And so I did that for about like a year and a half, and it built up like maybe 30, 40,000 followers. And then I found out that a family member friend of ours, their daughter, she died by suicide at 20. And we love this family. Like, she was a little kid when we first got married, and like, she's our neighbor. We used to take her everywhere before we had kids. She was like our little buddy. And she was like the happiest, funniest kid. And then we lost contact with the family for like 10 years. And I see the mom and I freaked out. I was like, oh my gosh, I haven't seen you forever. Like, what's new? How's life? How's your daughter? And she's like, oh, she died just barely. And I was like, what happened?
Wow.
You know, was it like she's sick? Was it cancer, car crash? And she's like, no. I found her in the bathroom, and she told me everything that happened. And as we got to the bottom of it, she's like, she looked at me and she's like, you know where it all went wrong? She's like, when she was 13, I handed her a loaded gun. And I didn't show her to use it, and it killed her. And I was like, you know, I'm in Utah where everyone like open carries at Walmart, you know? So I'm like, what? And she didn't pull out a gun. She pulled out her phone, and she's like, I gave her a loaded gun, and I didn't show her to use it, and it killed her. And I was like, dude, that's a phone, right? And we talked, and I shared that story on my Instagram account to just like parents that were following me. And there's like some teenagers following me too, because they thought it was funny. And for about 2 weeks, I was getting 1,000 to 2,000 messages per day from like other kids across America that were all chiming in and saying, dude, you think that only happened to your friend? Like, that's happened to all my friends. That's happened to me. That was happened to my brother, and he's gone now. It was happened to my sister, and she's gone now. I had a high school kid message me, and she's like, dude, I'm going to my 8th teen suicide funeral in the last 16 months.
Oh my
in my community.
goodness.
And so what that did is like, it totally just opened up this big Pandora's box. And it was all over the news. And I was just sharing the crap out of all these stories. I'd block out their name. I'd share, here's another one. Here's another one. Like, athletes were messaging me, celebrities were messaging me, like newscasters, people all over the world. And I remember thinking, like, I was feeling myself for Instagram. I was like, we need to start a movement. We need to save these kids. And I was like, I'm going to just call Save the Kids, because we got to save them. So I started, I was just posting all on Instagram stuff I was finding about social media tied to mental health. And it wasn't like me making it up. Like, this is, I'm not like a PhD therapist who just reads books. I mean, I was talking to kids. They were telling me their own words, like how it screwed their family up, or, you know, ruined their mental health, or how they were suicidal. How many kids are self-harming, like in 4th, 5th grade now, and like talking about it on Snapchat or TikTok. And then I started speaking. Like, a lady's like, could you come talk to our church group? I've got 14 teenage girls in my youth group. Like, they're all struggling. Could you just make a presentation out of this? And I was like, yeah. So I put some slides together and some notes and some stories. And I just went to this little tiny church, talked to 14 kids, and they were like all bawling afterwards. And like, the leader ladies like messaged me. They're like, dude, that was the most important message these girls have ever heard right now. And then how it works a lot of places is people hear about that, then their church reached out, and their church reached out. And then I just started speaking like crazy. So the first year, I think I spoke like over 400 times. Last year before COVID, it was like almost 500 times. I was speaking like some months, like 90 times, just go to like a school and a city, hit every middle school, hit every high school, and then do a parent night for all the parents. It was just blowing up like crazy. Ted asked me to TEDx Salt Lake. That was like 2 months into it. That was just September 2018. It was like 2 months after I started the Save the Kids stuff. They're like, dude, come talk about this. And it was funny, since you watched it, like if you go look it up, it said they picked the stupidest title ever. It's like, can flip phones end our social media addiction? I see. You watched it. I talked about flip phones for like 4 seconds. I'm like, let's call it that. And there was a lady who spoke at TEDx with me, and hers was on sex work. Like, she was like this this professional sex worker, but like she didn't actually. She would just like have guys come over who were struggling, and she'd just like rub their back and hug them, and that was it. So she was like more like a therapist who would massage their backs. And her title was like, how my life as a sex worker, like blah, blah, blah. So hers got all the views because, you know, people are typing sex. But that was really fun to do. If you watch it, like I go out and talk a lot about the dangers of social media and how it's affecting kids' mental health, and how parents are just giving their kids smartphones way too young. And they don't even realize, like, what are you exposing your kids to? when you give them a phone. Like it's not a phone. These aren't phones anymore. Dude, the fact that it make phone calls is like the least used app on the device, right? It's a mini supercomputer, and you're giving your kid access to 2 billion humans and apps that like no adults most adults can't handle. And kids are getting them younger, and it's getting worse and worse. And so I'm just trying to shout fire and like throw, get people's eyes open and get their attention. And then hopefully offer parents a lot of resources and like tips, like how to change this and save their kids from it. But it's been fun. So when COVID hit, like I had like 90 speeches in February or like March, and like 85 ready to go in April and May, and everything just stopped on a dime. And so my wife's like, you should just start podcasting about it. And so I was like, all right, fine. So started a podcast just called the Collin Kartchner Podcast. It's just parenting, where I interview experts like in the psych world and in mental health. But the cool part is like every 3 or 4 ones, I'll have a bunch of high school kids come in, and I've got like 4 or 5 mics, and we just chat about just life as a high schooler. And dude, to hear what these kids say is the best parenting like information ever. Because it's not some parent who's like, I'm a therapist and here's what kids tell me.
It's coming from the horse's mouth.
The kids are saying, they're like, dude, on Snapchat, dude, every day grown men are asking me for nudes, like guys at my school.
Man.
Like, and this is how they do it. And here's how kids hide their phones, their second phones, their third phones from their parents. Like parents message me like, dude, I could listen to these kids talk all day. It's the most eye-opening stuff. So now we've been working a lot with foundations like Operation Underground Railroad, working really hard with like fighting sex trafficking. One of my fun like little hobbies is I smoke out pedophiles on Instagram and expose them, like share their face, like tag their accounts. There's one guy who's been commenting a lot of like little girl model pics, like really gross stuff. Dude, I found this guy. He's got his account private. It's public. He's this creepy old looking dude, like most of them are, dude. And he put his city where he lives, which is like 20 minutes from my house. And I messaged him and I was like, hey, I've got a podcast where we talk about life in Utah. And I know you live there. And I was wondering if you'd be a guest. And he totally wants to come on. And I'm going to just talk about stuff. What do you think about Utah? Do you like the mountains? Okay. So what about commenting on little girls' Instagram posts? Like, what do you think about that? And just roll it, dude, and record it and just see what he does,
Oh, bro.
This guy's my hero.
Oh man,
it's the Wild West, dude. Like throwing kids into phones and social media right now is the Wild West. Like you guys, in the police force, like you guys see like how scary it is out in the real world for people. This most dangerous place for kids right now is not on some alleyway in the middle of the most dangerous place for them is in their bedroom on a smartphone in their own house at night. That's the most dangerous place for them to be right now.
So I go ahead, AJ, go ahead.
So I used to lead a life group, like a young adult life group from my church, and they were anywhere from like 13 to 17 years old. And there's probably about 20 to 23 of them. And we would constantly talk about the effects of like social media. And one day I broke down and I told them like, I would consider like my childhood rough, like more rough than most. And I'm not sure that I would have made it out if I had social media growing up, just because you can't get away from it. Like, growing up, if you had someone who didn't like you, or if you had to wear like Shaqs or some crazy shoe that no one liked at the time, you'd go to school, they'd make fun of you, you'd go back home and you'd play with your friends and it would be over. Like no one else would talk about it. But you do that now and it's on Twitter, it's on Snapchat, it's on Instagram, it's on people's Finstas, which I didn't even know was a thing.
Fake Instagram.
People create fake Instagrams and Twitters and TikToks and Snapchats just to insult people and bully people. And that's the main purpose for it. It's a great world.
I ask moms a lot when I do parent nights. I'm like, okay, for the moms here, I want you to raise your hand and think, go back to when you were 13. It was like the hardest time of your life, right? Now, how many of you would have done well if you had Snapchat when you were 13? And like moms will tell me like, dude, all me and my friends, if we had Snapchat when we were in middle school, high school, like we all would have killed ourselves. Like none of us could have handled this.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be a cop right now.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's just like, but it feels like so many parents are just like more concerned with like keeping their kid the cool kid. And like, everyone else is giving their kids smartphones when they're 9, 10, 11, they keep begging me for it. And parents are just worried too much about their kids liking them and being their friend and being parents to them. You know what I mean?
Well,
it's not good.
Well, I saw a lot of this stuff and as a school resource officer, I saw it all the time, man. That's where I was introduced to Finstas, and we actually I actually did a social media training class because the kids don't see the dangers of it in many ways. And it's so scary. So one of the things I always told the kids, I said, look, if you guys can overcome this social media frenzy, this, addicted to my phone pandemic, then you guys have the opportunity of being one of the strongest generations that our world has ever seen, just because you guys are facing an adversity that we never faced. I was like, think about it like this. Like if you got into it with somebody when you're in high school, let's just say you got in a fight with them, and then it was over. And then maybe it would linger on a couple more days, but when you went home, it was done because there's no way to keep this conversation going. Then you show up to school the next day, maybe it goes a little bit longer, and then the 3 days later, there's the next biggest thing going on at school that day. But everybody forgot about it. Now, when you get in a fight, and Lord forbid you get your butt whooped in a fight, that thing goes on forever. I mean, the school that I worked at, they had a social media page. I'm not going to say the school name, but it was school name Fight Club. And all they did was post videos of people getting beat up on there. Then another thing that I got hip to was at pep rallies, when all these kids are together, what they do is somebody has an embarrassing photo or a nude photo or something like that, they airdrop it.
Yep.
They airdrop it. And I'm like, my goodness. So it freaks me out having 3 kids, because I have 3 kids.
Yeah.
And it freaks me out. My oldest is 6, about to be 7 in a couple months. And, his big thing is Fortnite. But me and my wife, we're really adamant about reducing their screen time, making sure, like, having limits on it. You can only get on at this time, and then you got to be off by this time. And then me and my wife have seen in our son in many situations where, we almost think it affects his attitude or his demeanor. And so it's kind of scary because, again, like you just said, Collin, like you got to, there's that fine line where you want to make sure your kids, you love your kids and that they like you or whatever, or they not necessarily like you, but they love you, but at the same time allowing them to be a kid. But our generation, like all of us, the 4 of us, we're having to learn how to parent differently than our parents ever had to do. So it's still a learning curve for us. So I want to go back to something you said on the TEDx talk that I saw, and what's kind of freaked me out a little bit more was the fact that people are killing themselves when they're getting their phone taken away.
Yeah.
Like,
that's one of the,
how do you prevent that?
I've got a handful of first responders, paramedics, that have me on, just text me when they get a suicide attempt of a teenager or a tween. And they tell me, we just had this happen and here's the reason why. The amount of kids that have attempted suicide just cause mom took their phone away would blow your mind. Like our high school, where my kids are going to go, we lost a senior last year because he got in a fight with his mom. Mom took his phone, went in his room and hung himself.
Wow.
And it's happening more and more. I think what parents need to realize is that it's not just a phone. It's not just a piece of technology, right? If you give your kids this, especially when they're young and their brains are being developed, like this is going to be their drug. This is like their dopamine. And it's not just a drug. It is their connection to their friends, right? And so if a kid's in crisis and, they fail a test or they have a fight with their parent and the parent just takes it away, you didn't just take away a phone. You took away their drug. You took away their connection to their friends. If they're in crisis, who do they talk to now, right? This is how they get help. This is their therapist, right? They need to go somewhere to share how they're feeling and talk to people and find a way to transmit their pain. And if they don't trust mom and dad, if they don't have close ties to siblings or, auntie, uncles, they're going to go on Twitter, they're going to go on Snapchat and tell the world like how effed up their life is. They want to die and they're hoping someone reaches out. But if you take the phone away, and they're so super addicted to it, they just realize in their brain, like, I have nothing now. And the amount of kids that have attempted suicide and completed is skyrocketing. I talk to ER docs all across the country. When I go and speak, usually I'll do a panel afterwards where I'll have like an ER doc come in and like a school resource officer and a couple team therapists. And the ER docs are always like, 5 years ago, we had 2 beds that maybe had kids in it. And now we have 30 beds and they're always full. And it's always something to do with social media, cyberbullying, or the effects of the anxiety that it causes. And so I tell parents all the time, like, if your kid's struggling, like do not rip it away. Don't ever think you're going to just rip that phone away, especially if they're older teens and they're super hooked to it. You got to find a way to scale down the usage. Think of it like any kind of drug. If they're hooked to heroin, like you're not going to just rip a needle away. You got to slowly, wean them down. But it is scary, and it's scarier how it's happening younger and younger. I go to every elementary school I go to. I'll talk to the counselor. I say, do you guys have kids at your elementary school that are cutting and posting videos of it on Snapchat or Instagram or TikTok? And they're like, oh yeah, like tons. That's like their new thing. And it's almost become like a trend. And parents are like, how is this happening? Like, dude, my high school, I think like one kid cut, and he was like the super goth kid who had like the big bell bottom Jinkos and like the black this.
Yeah.
And it was more of like, cause it was on trend. It was on brand for him to do that, And now like good kids, they're like 8, 9, 10 with good families, with both parents in the home, church going kids are like trying it out, and the parents are bawling it to me afterwards. And I'm like, you gotta understand, like this is what they're talking about. Like their friends hear about it on Instagram, their friends hear about it on TikTok, they read about it on Snapchat. And so they talk about it, and these brains are so underdeveloped, like they're gonna just try anything. They're very, very low risk when they're kids, and the decision-making part of their brain isn't developed for years and years. And so it's just, I think we're all gonna look back. And the good thing is like when you say your oldest is 6, like you're in a really sweet spot, because like this generation has been guinea pigs. Like we threw them into this experiment, and it was an experiment, right? Yeah, social media and smartphones and video games today, they're not the games. Like Fortnite is not like, when we played Mario Kart growing up. It's so video games is social media for kids, right?
Yeah,
100%.
You see Fortnite, you see when they play Clan. I had a high schooler from Denver come over to my podcast last week, and he said, I was playing Clan like nonstop. And he said, he's like, if I stopped playing, I felt a personal responsibility for my clan. Like I felt like I was letting them down. And I'm like, that's how they do it. Fortnite, especially, like if you can't just stop playing, you can't pause the game, right?
Yeah.
Like if you do, like everyone, you just screwed up for everyone else, right? I had parents go up to me and they're like, my boy's playing Fortnite all day, and I realized I cleaned up under his bed, and he had like jars of what I thought was apple juice, just like under his bed, like jar. And it was his pee, dude. He would pee in a jar with 9 because he had to keep playing because he didn't want to let his team down. And so gaming's all social media now. Social media, it's just, so I'm hoping what parents see that like, this generation right before us, like they got it the hardest. No one knew what was going on. These poor kids, like the amount of 19, 20 college age kids that are having anxiety and depression is just astronomical. So I'm hoping what parents will see is like, the pendulum swung so far out. Hopefully it's swinging back, but we've got to have a really tough conversation about like, when is the appropriate age to give kids stuff. Technology companies, they don't care. They're making billions, right? Until the government hones them in. There's a lot of pressure on parents to like really make some hard choices here to keep our kids safe.
My wife just read something, and I'll try to find the article and send it your way if you don't already have it. But it was about these creators of video games hiring top tier like neurologists and like brain experts,
child psychologists,
on what will get like your brain firing the most. So when they release like a beta version of a game, they'll send it to these scientists and neurologists and whoever who could, figure out what gets your brain firing the most. They'll break it down like, okay, you should put this here, send it back. They'll
use this color, make this sound, have it explode this way. Like they've got it dialed in. And Fortnite and Minecraft and Snapchat, Twitter, they have these guys on staff, right? These PhDs. I got there's a guy up in Northern California named Ramsey Brown, and his whole team are all PhDs in neuro addiction and child psychology. And they sit side by side with coders of gaming companies, mobile games, especially, and Snapchats of the world. And they sit there and they say, no, if you tweak it this way, if you add this, if you change this color, it's going to fire more dopamine on the brain, and it's going to keep kids coming back where they can't even focus anymore. And scary as it sounds, like kids, I mean, we had an Orem last school year, a 12-year-old kid, mom got a Latino boy, super hooked to Fortnite. Mom ripped away the Xbox because he wasn't doing his homework or something. And the poor kid hung himself because he lost his ability to play with his friends on Fortnite. And people are like, why would he do that? It's just a video game. Like, dude,
you have no idea. It's the same reason why.
You play Fortnite with your boy, you realize it's not the same. These video games are way different than they used to be.
Yeah, and just the mere fact that you can play Fortnite on other consoles. So remember when we were coming up, Like you had to have the same exact console to say
Plugged into each other.
Plugged into
Yeah.
each other to play with people. Now,
2 controllers max.
man, I downloaded. My son yesterday was like, "Hey, Dad, can you download Fortnite with me and play with me?" And I did it because what I was thinking about when I was younger was I remember when my dad came in the room and played Madden with me. I thought that was like the coolest thing ever.
So
like,
fun. Oh, yeah,
like
so
oh man, like cool. My dad's playing a video game with me. Like, so in my mind, I attribute that to, you know, another way to connect with my boy. So as we're doing it, I'm just thinking like, man, this is crazy. So I was able to literally download the phone on my game or the game on my phone, and I was able to play with him who's on Switch, but
Yep.
we're still playing in the same room. I'm like,
Wow.
this is
I didn't know
this.
that.
Oh yeah, and then and like you're just saying, Colin, like he's all about like the new skin that's coming out.
all about skins.
Yeah, like this kid has convinced me to buy like they're called V-Bucks, and I and I've never in my life ever
What the-
thought I would like buy anything on a game. Like I'm that guy that will play Candy Crush, and because of the pride in me, won't pay the extra $1 to remove the ads or whatever. Like nah, like or I'll just wait until I get a new life, like my lives fill back up, and then play again. But there's a lot of people out there that pay the extra money to get whatever they need to get. So my son has convinced me to buy V-Bucks for him. And
So is this like a current, like an online
Like
currency?
so they can buy new skins, outfits.
Yes,
and
bro.
Stuff, so they
Yes.
cool.
Wow.
and think about it. Fortnite is one of the biggest grossing games that doesn't even charge you to buy the game.
That's the thing. It's free, and they made $1.9 billion last quarter. Like,
Based off of all the stuff you purchase in game.
yeah,
Wow.
they got it dialed in.
So
you know, it puts us in a. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ryan.
no, I was gonna just say, so it's just scary, man. And so go and hold your thought, AJ. 'Cause I don't want you to lose that.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
going back to the law enforcement end of things, like what can we do? Like I hate talking about things like this because on one end it's like, man, it's so depressing. Like, is there even a solution? Like, can we even figure anything out? But then one of the things I've always been keen to doing, and it sounds like you're already doing it, Colin, is making kids influential in the right ways. Being able to be a voice and be vocal and make them cool, make them cool for having a voice for positivity. Because I had a conversation with the kid a while back, and he actually had got shot at my school, well, outside of the campus. But anyways, we were having a conversation. I was like, bro, do you know how much money you could make if you took all the negative things that are going on in this high school and went out and start speaking out against it? I was like, as a young kid that could potentially get a good message to do the right thing, do you know how many school districts would bring you in because you know how to speak the language of these children?
Yep.
So if we can somehow figure out a way to give these kids, and it sounds like you're already doing it, give these kids a voice to go out there because they speak the language. We give them a platform so that way, even if kids try to bully them or stand up against them, it's almost like they have those big brothers there that are going to protect them. Like, hey, don't worry about them. Like, we got you. Because we do that in every other industry, but it's almost like that's the way I need to see. Like we need to do for these kids is like we need that big brother approach to know like we're gonna protect you, we're gonna give you a big platform. We want you to go out there and speak out against some of these issues. Don't worry about the feedback that you're gonna get back because we're gonna protect you. Because the sad thing is, and I've realized this, and maybe you can relate, AJ. And I was telling Billy before you got here recently, and I don't know if this is a real thing, maybe it is. But this whole blacklisting thing, like so our following was growing like steadily. Like our following has been growing very, very consistently over the last few months, which has been phenomenal. Me and Billy, we're always looking at it, not because we're like, I think part of it because we're addicted to it, but the other part of it is like, we want to see the growth that our organization is doing because it's just a cool thing. Well, recently, like the last 3 or 4 weeks, it literally came, like it hit a wall. And it actually happened after we made a post about sex trafficking. And so what that did for me was I was like, you know, I haven't been checking my phone every other minute. I haven't been checking to see the success of our post. So, and maybe Billy, you can speak on this a little bit too, but I'm kind of glad that happened because I'm not so tied to it. So I know I'm kind of rambling on, but I think there's a lot of different things to discuss as far as bringing solutions, because I hope there's a solution out there, because I don't know what I would be able to do to raise these 3 kids in this world, this dark world, man. It's scary.
Hey everyone, we hate to interrupt such a good podcast, but we have to give thanks to the company that's keeping the lights on. Thin Line Anthem Supplement Company are the first responder supplement company, and they're currently giving our listeners 20% off their entire order. Just make sure you use promo code It's Needed, all capital letters, one word at checkout for 20% off. I'm currently using the supplements. Ryan's currently using the supplements. And my boy Billy just ran 4 miles, so I know he's on the supplements as well. Make sure you check them out, and just know we're not just showing them love because they are our sponsors. We use their supplements. We believe in them. We know what they stand by, and their beliefs align with ours. Again, check them out at thinlineanthem.com. Use promo code It's Needed, all caps, no spaces, for 20% off your order. Enjoy the rest of the podcast. Yeah, I mean, just to follow up on that, it puts us in a very unique position as parents because you have to play this balancing act, right? Because when we were growing up, I'm sure there were things that our parents didn't have that they thought were dangerous, because of whatever, whether it was bikes, right? Like, I'm sure when bikes first came out, they were like, wait, you're going to get on your bike and ride it where? Like, no, like, we don't want you on this contraption. And, we turned out all right. And the only reason I bring that up is I'm reading this book called The Coddling of the American Mind. And and it's really good. And it's about how good intentions and bad ideas are setting up a generation for failure. And it's about exactly that, right? Like giving our children space and not hovering over them, go play outside, you want to go do whatever, go do it, and let them get banged up a little bit. So this is rough because it's like, it's unknown and it's uncharted, and we want them to do what the rest of their friends are doing. But at the same time, we see the damage that it's causing. So you're absolutely right, Ryan. Like, I'm curious what the solution would be to this. And I'm sure, Collin, you have.
Yeah. Well, I think on what I really love. So for people in law enforcement, you guys have such a great position to come in and help out and be kind of big brother and help out a lot of these kids. The problem is that so many, and if you listen to my TED, like the whole issue is that this is not save the kids. This is save the parents first, so they can save their kids.
Yep.
All the issues we're talking about are because parents are forgetting to parent. And parents are just as hooked, if not way more hooked, on their own screens. Yeah. And so they feel bad. They want to throw, I want some me time. I want to check my phone. I want to play Candy Crush. I want to go look at Twitter. My kid's bugging me to go play catch. It's like, well, how do I shut him up? Like throw him an Xbox, throw him a DS, or throw him his phone when he's 6. It'll shut him up forever, right? Wow. And so parents need to stop using devices as a babysitter, but realize that the conversation is around how as parents, what can we do to set better examples? And what can we do to be more, engaging in our kids' lives? Because the devices are just babysitters, and we got to stop that. They're fun, and companies are racking up billions of dollars by babysitting our kids for us. But the conversation is parents need to put their screens down and start reconnecting with their own kids. People like yourselves, like I love every school I go to, I talk to the resource officers. And if you are a resource officer or you talk, you do community stuff where you can talk to the schools or the kids, you have such a great position to be in, to be able to be their kind of mentor and to be able to talk to them and be cool, be kind of like their big older brother. These kids, a lot of them don't have parents at home who are talking to them. Yeah. That's the saddest story is kids are like, you know what, Collin, like, I come home and every day, like my parents they're on their iPads, and at dinner, no one does dinner. And if we go to dinner, everyone's on their phones. I have no one to talk to. Like I can't even talk to my parents about this because they're just looking at their screens. Yeah. So you can come out and have conversations with the kids at school about their mental health and about social media and guide them and be like, hey, what you posted was not cool. And here's why. Yeah. I think one of the issues the screens are stealing from our kids is empathy and being able to understand like what you can and can't say. Because it's, if back in our days, if I wanted to, tell a kid I hate his face, like I just say it to him. And now kids can just post it. Yeah. And they can do it from a bedroom, from behind a screen. And so they don't see that girl bawling her eyes out. And so they don't learn, hey, what I said to her made her cry. I don't like how I feel when I do that. I shouldn't do that. So we're robbing them from empathy. So being able to come and say, hey, when you said that, like, you don't think that was wrong, but that was wrong. Here's why. And when you send this photo to the whole school during, an assembly on airdrop and it's a whatever, like, why is that wrong? Understand that a lot of parents aren't teaching their kids this anymore because they're just looking at their screens.
Yeah.
There's an officer in a high school in Idaho. When I went out there, his name's Officer Gomez. He's been an SRO there for like 7 years. Dude, and he started a Facebook page where he talks to kids and he talks to parents. He's like, hey, here's what's trending on TikTok right now, right? Doing this kind of dance and saying this and, driving through McDonald's and saying this. Like, kids, hey, if you're doing this, this is how dumb you look. Or, hey, he did a post once. It was hilarious. He's like, hey, to the high schoolers who follow me, he's like, when you send a boy a nude or something like that, he's like, do you know that there's a whole bunch of old men sitting in a law enforcement office an ICAC or somewhere that are going to be looking at your photos when this becomes a criminal case?
Yep.
So girls, think about it. When a boy asks you for a nude when you're 15 and you send it to him, just realize like there's a good chance that a bunch of old guys like me are going to see this too when we do a criminal case. Like, do you really want that? Just stuff, just being like a big brother to help these kids out. But again, it all comes down, like if you watch my TED, like everyone's like, what's he going to talk about? He's just going to talk about how kids are the problem and kids are addicted. And the whole thing is like, we're not going to fix any of this until parents wake up and say, hey, I got the problem. I need to reconnect with my kids. People like my family, and I got 4 kids. My oldest is going 9th grade. She's never had a phone, never had social media, and she's happy and she's thriving and our family's doing good. And everyone's like, how does she do that? And it's like, well, we just didn't make it a priority. We never gave her a phone. We're not on ours when we're around our kids. So they never saw from our example that this phone is everything. And it's the most important thing to dad. So I want one too, because monkey see, monkey do, And so it's like Ronald Reagan said, I think he said something like, every problem in our country can be solved at the dinner table. We got to start having dinner again without everyone looking at their phones,
That's good. That's good. As far as the empathy thing goes, I don't know if Mike Tyson really said this, but I seen this thing that came up online about Mike Tyson. It said the issue with social media is it's making people become too comfortable saying whatever they want to say without getting punched in the face. I was like, that's so true. Like, because growing up, like if you said something to somebody that was hurtful or upsetting, like you had to deal with that right then and right there. And there's also no consequences, really.
No, there isn't. I'll get messages after assemblies, like tons, which is my favorite thing. Cause most of them are like, that was so amazing. Thank you so much. Changed my life. But then I'll get some messages, especially after like middle schools when kids are really dumb.
I already know where you're going.
It'll be a Finsta. It'll be like, some weird Finsta account. It'll be like, F you or something like that. and I'm like, dude. And I always respond. Like, I'm always like, oh, thank you so much. Like, what do you think about this? What do you think? And I'll get these kids I'll engage with them. And I'm not going to be mad, be like, oh, you're blocked. Like, I always talk back in a nice way. I'm like, hey. and the funny thing is some of these kids, dude, like they'll open up and they'll tell me who they are and they'll apologize and stuff like that. And I'm like, dude, do you understand that anyone else, like if I screenshot that and found out that was you, like this could ruin your whole life.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like you don't understand that like this is never going to go away. And we got to teach our kids this, like everything you post will follow you forever.
The rest of your life.
And even the Snapchat stuff, it disappears. No, someone screenshot it and it's going to. And so I think, law enforcement officers could talk to high school kids, go, in the classrooms and say, hey, like tell stories of like, this girl who was a high school senior, a valedictorian, she just lost her scholarship to college because someone shared some stuff she posted 8 years ago on Twitter that was, this or that.
Yeah.
And help these kids realize that like, dude, you gotta really think before you post, you know what I mean?
Well, go ahead, AJ.
I've had more messages from fake accounts within the past 2 months than I ever have like collectively aside from these past 2 months. And it's exactly that, FU, F12, ACAP's the big one. ACAP. I'm just like, and you click on the profile and they have like 0 posts and
no photo.
Everything they do is like on their story or whatnot. But I did exactly what you did on Snapchat. I want to say like a year ago, someone sent me a Snapchat and it was just like a black screen with words. And it said like F the police, pig, donuts, emojis and all this, right? So I just messaged them back like, hey, that really hurt my feelings. And they're like, oh, we don't care. So we were like going back and forth for a while. And then they finally send me a picture. There's 2 of them and they're like flipping me off and they're like kids, right? They're like 8-year-olds and there's 2 of them. There's like a brother, like a 9-year-old, 8-year-old. And they send me a selfie and they're flipping me off. So what I did is I replayed it And I screenshot it just so the notification would come up on their screenshot. And then I sent them a picture of me in uniform, and they freaked out. They were like, "I'm so sorry. Please don't tell our parents," and all this. And then I was able to have a talk with them. Like, now, do you see like the consequences that could have arose from like you doing this? And they were so apologetic, and they still message me on Snapchat every now and then, but it's just like,
they probably love you, yeah. We got to realize this. And I tell his parents too all the time, stop condescending this generation and stop shaming these kids for making mistakes, because we all know, me, you, everyone on this podcast, everyone listening, if we had Snapchat in high school, all of us would be in jail too, right?
Without a doubt.
You know, for a fact, in high school, my mom, she's like, my son got expelled because why? He was sitting in class and he was bored, so he pulled out his junk under the table, took a picture, and airdropped to his buddies. And she's like, I can't believe this. And I was like, dude,
like,
I would have done that. I would have done that, dude. I would have been the guy. All my buddies, we had this conversation, and we're like, okay, Ryan would be in prison for that. We'd all be registered sex offenders. You know? So don't think that these kids are stupid. We screwed up. We gave kids a platform to showcase how immature they can be in a public setting where there's no consequence, and they're all and the brains aren't developed. Like, I mean, I tell parents, I'm like, I mean, for those who need to understand the brain, like the part of the brain to help kids make good decisions and logic and understand consequence for the male female brain isn't going to be developed till 25 to 30. So, we're handing these kids loaded guns at like 12. Dude, some mom posted this the other day, and the lady tagged me on it. She's like, this mommy blogger was like, my 10-year-old daughter's birthday, we spoiled her, got her an iPhone 11. And she's like, she's so happy we're spoiling her. And I'm like, and I just commented, goodbye childhood. Like, here we go. Like, that's all it's going to do. But understand the parents, like, stop. It's just, they're going to make stupid decisions. We either change the laws or we just stop giving phones. Well, because we can't give them heroin and then get mad when they get hooked and then be like, why are you hooked? It's like, you gave everything for them to do this, right?
One of the things I've said from day one, I was like, so there was last year I went to a town hall meeting where a kid was killed because he was basically beat up by two guys at the school, and they basically sucker punched him. One of the kids hit the wall, or the kid hit the wall, his head hit the wall, and then he was on life support, and they ended up pulling the plug on him. Wow. So I went to the town hall meeting, and as I'm there, I'm just listening to the parents and the school board and everybody bickering back and forth. So I finally stood up, and I was like, you guys want to know what the problem is? The honest to God problem in here right now is, one, there's no self-accountability. And then two, and I stood up and I held this in the air. I was like, this is a problem right here. I was like, if you guys want to know how to fix a lot of the problems right now, we need to go home and either take these away from these kids or monitor these phones more than what we're doing. I was like, we really shouldn't have. There's really no need to have a phone in the school. Honestly, there's not. Even if the excuse is, well, what if there's an emergency that happens? Well, what did we do back in the day? If an emergency happened, call the front office and we'll get it all figured out. Like, we've become so reliant and dependent on these phones that we don't even know how to function. And I'm guilty of it myself. I kid you not. This is a true story. Last week when I was in Minneapolis, however you want to call it, don't judge me on that. But anyways, last week I'm out there, I'm taking pictures, and as I take a picture, the lady that took the picture for me, she hands me my phone back and it drops face down. So I look at it, whole screen is cracked. So I'm like, okay, all good. It's a cracked screen. Well, I can't even unlock my phone. Like, I literally can't unlock it. It's like, and it's doing some weird thing where it's trying to punch in the code, so it keeps getting like 15 minutes, 20 minutes. Yeah. And I couldn't even turn it off. So I was like, hey, y'all. And I'm proud of myself because I didn't freak out like, oh, my goodness. I was like, it's all good, y'all. Like, don't even worry about it. Like, I was like, hey, let me just go find a Verizon store. But in my mind, I'm like, I need to have a phone going back home. I'm in the Midwest. I need a phone going back home. But back in, 20 years ago, nobody would even thought twice. Like, we wouldn't even thought twice. So I'm guilty of it myself. But we need to go to a place where we can remove these phones from the schools, because if you can remove the phone, it's almost like this was a light bulb moment for me. But you look at uniforms. When I was growing up and we used to have to wear uniforms in the Catholic school I went to, I was like, man, these are the stupidest things ever. But looking back, I'm like, no, uniforms are actually brilliant, because if you wear a uniform, you can't necessarily make fun of the clothes or the lack thereof that people don't have. So it's like, uniforms are great. Getting rid of the phones, it's a great idea, because now you can't have this bickering going back and forth, and you force these kids to deal with their adversity right then and there. Talk to the person, talk it out, do whatever you want to do. So I think it would be a great idea if we could, but the only way to do that is, like you said, Collin, is it starts with the parents, because if it's not a priority to us, it will never be a priority for me to go down to my child's school and tell them to do the same thing. So we need to be on one accord with that in order to start shifting this whole idea that I'm so attached to my phone, I can't get rid of it. It's making me like this separation anxiety occurs like when you don't have that phone. So it's wild. It's wild. Go ahead, AJ.
That's one thing that is starting to happen a lot more, is that schools are starting to realize that having phones at school is a horrible idea. There's really no benefit to it. And they're coming up with new policies. They're coming up with new whatever to get them out. I mean, a lot of schools I go to, they're like, hey, we just went, bell to bell, no phones. The kids can bring them, but they have to leave them in their locker room or their locker. And if we see it out, we confiscate it. And if they want to get it back, it's $5 or something. But the problem is like every school, like there's a lot of schools where teachers have their own phone policy, like in the class. It's not, there needs to be just a standard where, and I don't think and when you go to the schools, I've talked to a lot of schools where they go no phones. They always say the same thing. Like, dude, it was the best thing we've ever done. Getting the phones out of the school, the kids are focusing more. There's less distractions. There's less bullying. There's less drama. They're like, why didn't we do this years ago? Now, and the coolest, one of the most eye-opening stories. So there's a principal at the largest public high school in California, San Mateo High, Northern California. And this is where all the parents work in tech. Like all of these high schools, this is like top tier high school. All their parents work in some Silicon Valley tech office. And they banned phones from the high school last year. And if you talk to Adam, who's one of the assistant principals, who it was his idea, he's like, we went to the parents and we're like, hey, we want to get the kids to focus more. The phones are too much distraction, causing problems. What do you guys think? And the parents, all of them, I mean, there's always a couple, who are like, no, what about if there's a shooter? It's like, well, do you really want your kid like on their phone texting you when there's a shooter? Or do you want them to get the hell out and like go get safe somewhere, right?
Yeah.
But he said all the parents, these are parents in Silicon Valley, they're like, absolutely yes, get the phones out of the school. And if you talk to him, and we're actually filming his story of the school here for Save the Kids, he's, all the principals and the teachers, the admin, and the students too, that was the biggest part, is how many students are like, I'm so glad I don't have my phone here. Like it used to be so stressful to try and study and then have that thing just ding my leg all day. Snapchat notifications, just like hundreds. And so you're going to see it happen. If you're a resource officer at a school, or if you're in a little community, like bring that to the table. But like you said, I've been places where the school came at it and they said, we're doing this, we're shoving it down your throats. Parents, there's no more phones. And it got rejected because it didn't come from the parents. And parents, there's always a couple parents who freak out, right? No mask meetings or whatever. There's always a couple, freaked out parents who scream. It has to come from parents and say, hey, we want this policy so our kids can be safe and not distracted. Push it up to the principals because they don't want to ruffle feathers, right? They want parents to like them so they keep their jobs. But it has to come from parents up to make it so there's more buy-off that way.
Another key important of why it needs to come from parents, because it rids the stress and pressure off of the student to say, hey, look, I can't have my phone because my mom took it away. If you take it away from exactly. But if you take it away from everybody, then now they don't have to defend themselves of why they don't have their phone. So that's why it must come from that, because it's like you have a parent that's trying to do it on their own, which is great, but then now their kid goes to school and now they have to worry about being bullied or whatever it may be because you're this and that because your parents took your phone away. So that's why
Connor has a porn addiction. His mom will let him take his phone to school as soon as he goes masturbate in the bathroom. Like they will, though. They'll get made fun of. So it's got to be an all or nothing, right?
Well, that was my point too earlier. As you said, that was my last point. I couldn't remember what my last point was, but if as an adult, it's hard to look at stuff. I mean, I stopped going on TikTok, honestly, because when you pull up TikTok, like the stuff that comes up, I'm like, my goodness, like
And they're young. They're always young.
They're very young.
It's
And
weird.
so I remember, like you were saying earlier, Colin, like being in high school, your hormones are raging right there, like in high school, raging in high school. Like, and so me and Billy were talking about before we got on today, but I remember like back in the day where like you had like basic cable, and then like you would have the fuzzies on the screen, and then when you had the fuzzies on
the dial halfway,
you could get a glimpse. You could get a glimpse of like what stars or whatever it may be, and it's like, oh wow, I think I just saw something. Like,
oh wait, there it is.
and that's all you need to go. I got to go to the bathroom for a few minutes. No, that's it.
So you had that back in the day, and now kids have unlimited access if you give them a phone to that. So that's why it's even that much more important. If it's difficult as adults to make sure that we can be responsible and know what we can, and this is coming from somebody that has a fully developed brain. If it's difficult for us, how difficult, Billy said, but if it's difficult for us, I mean, how much more is it difficult for the kids? And that's why it's so important. We have to be able to have these conversations, and I'm so on with you, man. Like, it's got to start with us. There's so many guests that we have that come on here that make me feel freaking convicted in my own lifestyle. I'm like, I'm a freaking terrible parent. I'm a terrible.
I don't want to shame, but we got to wake up. And if we can talk about something I think is going to be even more impactful for especially law enforcement. I went to, I forgot, it was like Portland somewhere. And some of the detectives came to my speech. And the sheriff's department, and someone who's one of the guys who's like over like major crimes or something. And he said something that just totally shocked me, and I totally got afterwards. But he said, if we go and investigate a major crime, and it doesn't have to be a sex crime, right? It could be any major crime, homicides, it could be sexual assaults, it could be any of that kind of stuff. He said, if we don't find ample amounts of porn, we have not looked hard enough. There is a huge tie between exposure to not pornography. I'm talking the porn stuff. Parents today are like, it's not a big deal. I had a Playboy or a Victoria's Secret catalog. Like, parents, they understand like the porn that kids are exposed to now. Yeah. Fight the New Drug, which is a big really awesome anti-porn group. They found that like 80%, it was like 82% of the porn videos on Pornhub and like, and on the sites, like 80% plus was violent porn, meaning there was yelling, screaming, slapping, smacking, choking, something like that. So these kids are being exposed. I call them, this is a porn machine. If you saw my TED, when parents ask me, when they say, what's the appropriate age to give my kid a smartphone? I say, whatever age you're okay with them to start looking at porn. Is that 10? Is that 30? Whatever it is, that's the age. But the type of porn they're being exposed to, very violent, very degrading, scary. I mean, any kind of porn you can think of, right? You can watch The Simpsons have sex. You can watch Anna and Elsa do it. It's crazy. The tie-in between that and these boys and girls being exposed younger and younger, and it's not just a boy thing, it's girls too. What they're seeing and what that's doing to them, and the tie between porn addiction and committing violent acts. One of the scariest stats is the rise in sibling on sibling sexual assault happening in the home is skyrocketing. Sibling on sibling, cousin on sibling, that kind of stuff. And most of the investigations, the boy who committed the crime or the act of the cousin, 8, 9, 10 years old, they will say it's because they saw something on their iPad or they saw something on their phone and they wanted to act it out. And so that's a whole nother podcast. But if anything, parents, like they don't need a phone. We all realize that because it's not a phone, it's a mini computer, right? If you need to get a hold of them, there are products out there that can call, text, and that's it. That's a great option. But just understand that, I've been talking a lot. I think I've been talking a lot about sex trafficking and child sexual exploitation the past couple of weeks on my Instagram. I've been posting people's faces and how they do it and the comments that kids get and how they get sextorted. It's the saddest thing. It happens in their bedrooms at their own homes. But then I would start talking to parents about, hey, so that's happening, but how do you make sure that your kid isn't the next perpetrator? I don't think a lot of parents are realizing that you're setting your son and your daughter up to be the next person who's perpetrating on kids, who's going after it. And it happens every day. I post the articles of another 17-year-old kid or a 16-year-old kid who sextorted a bunch of kids on Snapchat, acting like he's their age and then getting a conversation going, then sending him a nude and then getting one back and then keeping those and then saying, if you don't send me more or send me $5,000 or $100, I'm going to post these.
Wow.
And the kids who are getting busted for this like a lot of them are like just good kids.
Yeah. Yep.
And so how do you make sure that, you know, you keep your kids safe, but also how you make sure you're not going to accidentally turn your kid into the next perpetrator of other kids. But man, it's just, like, the more I see it, like there's really no good reasons anymore.
And there needs to be an update. There needs to be an update. There needs to be an update in criminal law, because, and the reason there needs to be an update with the laws is because those laws were created back when, like, you know, child pornography was, you know, you're actually, people were making and distributing, they're getting kids, making porn with the kids.
VHS tapes.
Exactly. And they're sending it out. You know what I mean? Back like those little Dateline interviews where like they would like, hey, you know, hey, yeah, I'm doing good. Where's everybody at? They all, I haven't seen it over here. So that's kind of when those laws were kind of created, but now they're not up to date with where we're at today. Because one of the things I hated doing most as a school resource officer was having to arrest or cite a kid for possession or distribution of child pornography. I hated doing it because they didn't know what they were doing. I mean, they knew what they were doing, but they didn't know the repercussions of that. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I think a lot of DAs, district attorneys, are seeing like, hey, look, we shouldn't prosecute on certain ones of these because, again, it can taint them the rest of their life. But we have to have an update to what these laws are. Not to say that we reduce punishments, because sometimes fear can be a factor, but I don't think fear is a solution. You can't curve a change with fear. You know what I mean? So I think there needs to be some type of legal update to where we're at with society, because we're living in different times. And
a lot of states have done that. I grew up in Arizona. I know Arizona over the last couple of years reduced it, you know, sending a nude photo from, it used to be a felony. Like you said, felony distribution of child porn, and these kids were getting registered as sex offenders as seniors in high schools, which is like, dude, they're losing scholarships. It's going to screw their life up for the next years. And so reducing it to like misdemeanor, something like that. And no one can argue that that's not a good idea. I mean, again, we gave kids platforms, and like, you think about Snapchat, like that's the number one culprit. I
always say that's the side of the devil right there.
That is the devil's app, right? And I always try and remind parents, do you remember why Snapchat was created? Snapchat, when it came out, it was called Peekaboo. Like, it was created for one reason, and that is to sext. That's it. And so I tell parents, I'm like, okay, so your son got busted for sexting or sending nude photos, and now he's getting expelled and his life's over, and you're mad at him? Like, you gave him the app to do what he did. It's like getting mad at your kid. Like, give him a box of condoms when he's 16 and you got pissed because he didn't use them to blow up animal balloons. It's like, what? He used it for sex? Weird. You know what I mean? I thought I was going to make a horsey. But so looking at these apps that were made for adults, like, stop giving, if anything, like, stop giving your kids Snapchat, stop giving your kids like TikTok and Instagram. Those are, no adults should have those anyways. Those are all rated, you know, the worst part, those are all rated 12 plus. Like, if you look at the App Store, like Apple and the App Store, they're like, these are okay for 6th graders. And it's like, dude,
yeah,
like, I can watch porn on Twitter. Like, I can watch porn on TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat. Like, that's like if you send your kid to a PG rated movie and suddenly there's porn, F words, N words, everything, like, wouldn't you be a little ticked? Like, if that happened at a movie theater, parents would be on CNN screaming.
Oh yeah.
But it's 100%. Happening on this every day, and they're like, well, it's just the way things are, you know?
Yeah.
It's like turning on your Xbox and playing like a video game, and some little kid on there calling you the N-word. Like, I got you.
Oh,
like, what?
The little,
like, what did you just say to me?
The online bangers, bro.
Oh yeah, 100%. Collin, it's refreshing to hear you talk about the principal out in California that banned the phones. And the only reason I say that is because my father-in-law owns a company where he creates like products for like classrooms and like offices, called Privacy Shield. Shout out to them. But he created a bag that you like attach to your desk, and you put the phone in there, and it blocks the signal to your phone. And he's like, you know, this is a great idea. We're going to sell millions, blah, blah, blah. And he started like sending it out to schools, and they were getting shut down so fast because people were like, well, what if an emergency happens and then they need to make a call? Or what if something happens and they need to record it? That way it's documented. And it blew my mind. And it took such a big part of me that trusted society out of my body. Like, wow, is this real? Like,
this stupid? Yeah, they have so his name's Adam Gelb, is the assistant principal at San Mateo High. So there's a company called Yonders, which makes these pouches where you can put it in and it locks, and there's a timer on it or something like that.
Yeah.
And so they started using those, which, and the thing is the guy who created that business, like let his kids go to that high school. So it was like a really cool idea.
Gotcha.
But the issue, and that's the problem, is it all comes back to like parents need to wake up and understand, like, what are we doing to our kids with this stuff? How do I get a hold of my kid? If you ask a high school principal and you say, hey, kids are getting their phone lit up all day with messages and texts, they'll tell you, they'll be like, dude, half of those are their mom. Are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay? Do you need anything? Right? Parents have freaked out, and we got to go back to the old 80s ways of raising kids, where it's like, if you forgot your lunch, deal with it. Right? If you forgot your water bottle, dude, deal with it.
That goes back to that book, Coddling of the American Mind. Like, you have to read that book.
I went to the richest high school. I went to the richest high school in Utah to do an assembly, and I was waiting in the waiting area. And I was there like 20 minutes early and waiting there. And I saw two parents at the richest high school in our state. One guy walks in like this nice suit and tie, and he's all flustered. And he walks up to the front and he goes, hey, sorry, Michaela forgot her chapstick. And he threw the chapstick to the front desk lady and he left. And I was like, did that just happen? Like, dude, this guy left work, went home, got his daughter, who's at least 14, her chapstick, drove it to the high school, gave it to her like it was nothing. And I was like, dude. And then some lady came in. She's like, hey, Connor forgot his water bottle. And I was like, what the freak is happening? Like,
you don't got water fountains? Like, what is going on?
Connor's going to be thirsty.
So it is. Like,
real thirsty.
We got to stop. I don't know what happened, man. I don't know if like all of us, I'm an 80s, 90s kid. I don't know if maybe all of us, like maybe our parents didn't do that for us, or maybe we weren't very close to our parents. And so now like we're all trying to overcompensate by like being way too cool, where we're chauffeuring our kids and being like their servant and all this stuff. So maybe we need to have more of a psychological discussion, like why adults are so worried. And I think a lot of that too is Facebook and Snapchat. I think one of the best things I ever did as a parent was getting off Facebook and then unfollowing everyone on Instagram. So about a year and a half ago, I unfollowed everyone but my wife.
I just saw that. That's pretty cool.
Just my wife. And the reason I did back then was I was doing more as like a little symbol, like, hey guys, if you're married, like just follow your wife for a week and see how that changes how you feel about her and life, And what it did for me is I stopped seeing what all my buddies were doing with their kids and the trips they were taking and the Disneyland and like, oh, I just got him to do this or knew that. And I didn't even realize that subconsciously was like changing how I parented my own kids. Cause I was like, oh, I never felt like I was good enough. I never felt like I was doing enough as a parent. Unfollowing everyone so I didn't see every second of their life, like changed the game of how I parent my kids. I went from like, oh, you need to be in soccer and you got to be in piano and dance and then this and that. Why? I don't know, because everyone else's kids do that. They post about it, to just being like, you know what? If you don't like soccer, screw it, dude. I don't want to pay for it. Like, what do you want to do? I don't know. I just like drama. All right, well, let's just do that. Let's cut piano. Let's cut soccer. Let's not worry about going to Disneyland, 3 times a year. Like, let's just like, I don't think parents realize that like being on Facebook, being on Instagram and following all your friends and people who don't even know and all the influencers out there, like the whole gamut of that is like shouting, you aren't doing enough. You need more. Wow. Your kids need more. If they don't have more, you're a bad parent.
Yeah.
So when I did that, dude, it changed everything. So I don't know, last bit of advice is like, you want to be a better parent and be less stressed out. We save so much money too. We weren't spending like $90 on birthday cakes anymore. Dude, we weren't like hiring clowns every time you learned how to pee in the potty. We didn't have like mariachi band. Dude, every parent has a mariachi band like their kid like pees in the potty for the first time. It saved us money, time, everything, So that's one tip, if you want to make it easier for you as a parent, go and follow everyone on Instagram.
Man,
Billy, I'm curious what you have for this, because Collin, if you don't know, Billy, the guy behind the camera, is the one who put us in contact with you. So Billy, I'm curious what you have for
and
this.
Billy also runs my social media account, so I don't do any social media at all.
Listen to it.
Yeah.
I have a 1-year-old. He's just over 1. So, I mean, obviously way too young for any of that. Doesn't really know what's going on. But I just want to make sure I'm just leading with wisdom and like kind of have a plan as far as when he gets of age for that kind of stuff. And especially with porn, he's very young, but obviously it's just going to keep getting worse and worse. And I just think like that's a huge issue. And yeah, I just wanted to learn more and kind of just have a plan of how to keep going as Jacob gets older.
When you have babies that age, like the big thing is just don't do what everyone else did for the last few years. Don't let the phone be the little pacifier. You know what I mean?
Right.
We're seeing, I talked to a lot of occupational therapists, child psychologists, pediatricians, and they're always saying like how, when kids come in, like they can't, like kindergarten, like half a kindergarten class can't even hold a pencil anymore. And they can't even, like a lot of them can't even talk, like speech delays, cognitive delays. And the big thing is the emotional delay. When a baby is crying or a toddler is crying, having a tantrum, if you just throw them a phone and say, hey, here's your favorite YouTube video, and then they're all suddenly happy. Now that's good for mom, right? Because it's like, oh, it solved the problem instantly. But what does it teach in a little toddler is like, hey, this thing is my pacifier. This thing is like, if I feel bad, this will always make me feel better. And then what happens, you see these kids turn 12, 13, 14, and that's been their pacifier since they were 1, 2 years old. Like you take that away because they failed their tests or they hit their brother, they're going to be in the ER, right? Because that's been the thing that has always been there, calm them, save them. So, I mean, beyond the neurological and the emotional delays, the cognitive and all that kind of stuff, like if anything, for the parents out there that have little bitty kids, like screen time's not bad, but too much is horrible. So, the AAP, American Association of Pediatricians, last year they said our recommendation, our guidelines for parents for screen time for kids at 2 and under is 0 hours a day. And under 5 is like no more than an hour. And 8 to 11, no more than 2 hours. And if the doctors are saying that and the science is coming out, like let's get ahead of the curve.
Yeah, straight up. The one last thing I'm gonna say too is going back to an earlier point with AJ, you're talking about your father-in-law, the device that he created. It'd be interesting to see what the statistics were because everybody wants to say, oh, what if there's an active shooter? And those active shooters are obviously very real threats, but I would be interested to see what the numbers are if you compare the amount of kids that have lost their life in an active shooter to the amount of kids that are losing their life to suicide.
Oh my gosh, that's
uncomparable.
Uncomparable. And so when you see the numbers and you see the data, it's like one of my good mentors always talks about, the risk versus reward. And, if it's predictable, it's preventable. And so kind of going back to identifying these risks, he's an expert in risk management. If you identify the risks, then now you can start to work towards solutions to prevent those. I think that's what people need to see is like, look, if you're so afraid of an active shooter because that's what everybody's been ingrained to fear, you fear the man that walks on a campus with a gun, rightfully so. But like you said earlier, Collin, the gun is right here. And when these kids walk onto a campus, they have a gun every single day that they walk onto these campuses. So if you get rid of these off of the campuses right here, now you're going to save more lives in actuality because, again, the statistics, I would imagine you got a lot more people losing their lives on these campuses because of these guns as opposed to the guns that somebody walks on with an active shooter.
Suicide, if you look at every state, California, Arizona, Utah, I'm on the West Coast, Colorado especially, suicide is the leading cause of death for 10 to 17 and 17 to 25. It's number one. You go look at the leading causes, school shooters, like how many kids have lost their death. It's not even on the chart, right?
It's like fires.
Yeah.
It's like fires. Like how many we do fire drills all the time, right? And saying I got this from Gordon Graham again, but fires. He's like we do fire drills all the time. When's the last time we've ever seen somebody lose their life in a fire?
In a school fire? I don't know. I don't think I ever has one. At least in the last 50 years.
Exactly. So it's like not to say you take away the credit for doing fire drills, but there's other drills that we should be doing, phone drills that we should be doing because there's people dying every single day because of phones as opposed to a fire. So, man, this is
the biggest threat. It's not, I mean, and I understand why parents are afraid. A lot of it is because and I hate blaming people and things, but a lot of it is because you talked about the protests and Black Lives Matter and stuff like that. The headlines that get you pissed off are the headlines that sell, right? Headlines and articles and news and media, they want to make you as mad and as scared as possible. That's what gets people to click so they can serve ads, right? So that's their model. But understand that like with the school shootings and things like that, like parents are freaked out because they're constantly inundated on CNN and on Twitter and Fox News of all the scariest things ever happening in the littlest, remotest parts of the world. And so there's always this fear of like, oh my gosh, that school shooting, we had, this one, there's one every day. And so it's igniting so much fear. And when parents, if they parent from a place of fear, they're never going to make good decisions. And so look at the facts, look what's the biggest cause of the issues, of the problems. You go in any high school, and every time I go to high school, I say, what are your number 1, 2, and 3 biggest problems here? Number 1, there I say kids struggle with anxiety, depression, and suicidal thoughts. And then after that, it's usually like drugs or booze, right? It's always anxiety, depression. It's always mental health.
Yep.
So why are we not addressing this more as the biggest problem that's killing kids? The phone, like, I'm so glad you said just like that. The phone, this is the biggest threat to the kids' safety, to their mental health, to their life.
Yep. You see the correlation in law enforcement, man. Mental health is one of the leading growing issues in law enforcement, man. We're seeing that on the street, and suicide is the biggest killer for law enforcement as well. So I'm sure there's a correlation there as well. So, hey, man, this was a phenomenal podcast. I hate to cut it short because of time, but man, this was just, Collin, man, I can't thank you enough for everything you've done and the work that you're doing, man, because it truly matters. And oh shoot, Billy, that freaking spider's like crawling up the.
Yeah, right. I believed you for a second.
I tried to get him too. I tried to get him
freaking out.
Oh, but
so you could bully me online.
That's exactly what I was gonna do. I was gonna bully you amongst our group.
I'm already logged into my Insta account to make fun of it.
Yeah. Just real quick before we log off, I know that a lot of our listeners and viewers are law enforcement or people considering going into law enforcement. And you may be wondering, like, well, what does this have to do with me being a cop or me going into the field of law enforcement? We addressed it throughout the podcast. But I just want to remind you that a big part of you being a successful police officer is being a good person, making sure you're okay outside of the uniform. So just consider this information that you need to better yourself and to improve yourself. Therefore, it will affect you on the job.
Big time. If you think about it, and I get to go talk to a lot of like conferences where it's just adults and CEOs of companies and things like that. If you're in a high stress job, CEO of a company, law enforcement, very, very high stress jobs where you need to focus and you need to be attentive. Like if your kids are struggling with this stuff, if your daughter's at home self-harming and suicidal and you're on a 12-hour shift, like that's a hard place to be in.
Yeah.
Be able to go to work and focus on your job and make good decisions when you know at home right now your kids are really struggling. Or your son said he's just been cyberbullied to the point he wants to kill himself, and you got to focus at work and do both. That's a hard place to be in.
Yeah.
And so, I'm glad you said that. Like this information, as anything more, most of you, if you're not a parent yet, you are going to be. And to be able to help keep your kids smart, safe, healthy, so you can do your best job with what you're doing at work. I think that's very important.
And Collin, lastly for you, man, is there any other words of hope that you can give the parents that are out there that are struggling right now? Because I know parents personally that are struggling with their kids that are either older, going through some of these situations right now. Maybe somebody like me that has younger kids, but I know it's going to be a struggle. What kind of words of hope and wisdom that could you be able to provide to our listeners?
They're understand, number one, the kids are so resilient. They're more resilient than we are as adults, and the kids are going to be okay. And it's never too late either. I got a lot of parents who are like, oh, my daughter, she's 17, 18, 19, and she's been anxious, depressed for 5 years. And I've had literally moms say, you know what, we screwed up so much with our older kids. We're just going to work hard on these younger ones. Like I've literally heard parents say that. So don't give up on your kids. Understand that it boils down to the needs they have, which is to be seen and to be heard and loved. And if they can't be seen, heard, and loved by the people who matter most, which is mom and dad or auntie, uncle, or siblings, if they can't get it at home because we're too busy or we're too focused on our social media or whatever it is, they need those needs met. And they're going to find a way. And the worst place is to go online and go on Snapchat or go on Instagram and say, hey, anyone up? Hey, I'm suicidal. Hey, anyone want to talk? Anyone? I need to be seen, heard, loved, right?
Yeah.
They're going to find it somewhere. So if anything, like if we want to fix this, reconnect with your kids, right? Go put your own phone down, dinner table, like go get a basket, put your phones in the basket from 5 to 9 and just try really hard to reconnect with your kids. I actually have all these like little memes I have. So whenever I go to restaurants, like if I see a bunch of families at dinner and they're all staring at their phones and not talking, like I'll throw up AirDrop and it'll be like, hey, put down your phones and talk to each other, stuff like that. I keep boxes, like I have pallets of like stacks of Uno cards, like packs of Uno and Phase 10. I'll keep in my bag, in my back pocket. And if I go to a restaurant, I see families or airports and they're all ignore each other on screens, like I'll just walk up and I'll be like, hey, you guys look really bored. I bet your mom and dad would love to play you.
I love Collin.
Uno. And I'll throw them a pack of Uno and I'll walk off. And it's the funniest thing ever because you see like five heads pop up and they're all like confused, like, what was that? And then the phones all go on the ground or on the table and they open the cars and you look back 5 minutes later and it's like, dude, they're being a family again, Look at them all talking to each other,
That's
laughing.
powerful, man.
It's all about, if we want to fix it, just focus on what can you do? Go reconnect with your family, reconnect with your kids. Don't let the screens take over the family life. Because we're all going to look back. I mean, I always tell parents, you have 940 Saturdays. That's it, from birth to 18. That's it. That's all the time you have to make an impact. And no parent wants to get to 941 and say, dude, we just looked at phones the whole time. Like, dude, I missed everything.
Man, I don't even want to know how many Saturdays honestly, Collin, man, you've encouraged me to be a better dad in so many different ways, man. Seriously, I can't thank you enough. And, right when you think you're doing okay, I've realized you can always do even better, man. So, thank you so much, man. Lifeline friend. The thing I love about the podcast, man, is we always get lifelong friends from here, man. I definitely will probably be reaching out to you and in areas that whatever it may need, man, and vice versa, man. So I just appreciate you. And I also want to tell our sponsor how much I appreciate them, which is Thin Line Anthem Nutrition Company, which is a company by first responders for first responders to improve your health and fitness. I mean, you could throw out having a good relationship with your kids and your family if you don't have good health and nutrition at home because you won't be around to see it. So, it's so important to make sure you keep your health and wellness up. And we do that with Thin Line Anthem Nutrition. I've been on their pre-workout, their protein. It's good stuff. Billy over here, even though my man is scared as ever of spiders, my man is trying to get swole as ever.
And he ran 4 miles the other day.
He did.
4 miles.
Yeah,
Listen,
he did.
I don't like driving 4 miles. You ran 4 miles and then complained about it like, oh, I ran it slow. Like, you still ran 4 miles,
bro. I ran 3 miles the other day and almost died, bro. I told my wife when I came back, I was like, that was a Holy Spirit run right there.
Yeah, I'm gonna keep flexing. I'm gonna keep flexing to make sure you guys keep going too.
Okay, yeah. You ain't saying nothing but a word, bro.
So shout out to our sponsor. Go ahead.
Hey, Collin, how do people get a hold of you?
Follow me on Instagram. It's just at Collin Kartchner, just my name there. I post, there's hundreds and thousands of messages from kids. There's stories about every app out there. If you want to learn about what's on TikTok, there's 3 of those highlights. There's hundreds of stories of high school and teenagers. There's stories about everything you can think of, iPads for kids, video gaming, porn. And I post a bunch of stuff every single day. So just my Instagram at Collin Kartchner, and website is savethekids.us.
Do you have a YouTube channel or no?
I don't know. Well, we have one that we're starting for the Save the Kids video stuff, but no, the only videos I have on YouTube is my TEDx, and then there's a couple of interviews, stuff like that. But once COVID's gone, hopefully soon, I'll be back on the road, going out to all across the country speaking and stuff. So if you want to see if I'm coming to your city, and every event's always free. It's always free. Parents can come out. I got sponsors to help me get there, so they can come to the assemblies. They come to the parent night, show up, take notes, have some fun.
That's
learn
cool.
a little bit, and I respond to all my DMs too. So send me a message if you have any questions.
Nice.
Cool, man. Well, thanks again. And our listeners, I can't thank you guys enough. If you guys enjoy this podcast, if you guys enjoy the content that we're sending your way, please do us a favor and give us a 5-star rating, 5-star review, and tell us why you either like or you don't like it, because that's what helps us improve this podcast. So we really appreciate you guys so much. We have some phenomenal guests coming to you. Collin was another one. We had Christine Devine last week. I told you we're going to get Alice Johnson on here, who was granted clemency by Donald Trump. We got a whole bunch of people coming on, so continue to stay tuned for good, positive content coming your way. So we love you guys, and we'll see you guys next week.
Peace.